So, well, as people come in, if this is your first time in our brand new, exciting building, let me welcome you to Brigger Hall. If it's more than your first time, I'm sure you're still enjoying these wonderful digs. We're very excited to be able to restart our Taplin Lecture Series in our brand new building. So thank you. So before I get started, though, and bring up the center, I wanted to go through some housekeeping. Number one, so some safety. There are two exits to this room over there where I'm kind of pointing in the back right to you, and over there on the back left to you. Those would be the exits that you would proceed to in a calm, orderly fashion should you hear any alarm. All right, I have no indication that we have any scheduled fire tests, so if you hear an alarm, just proceed calmly out and go. Secondly, and I want to sort of read through this and get the verbiage correct. I'm going to take a little moment to underscore Princeton's free expression values so that we're all on the same page and we can enjoy this and our opportunity after the lecture to ask insightful and incisive questions. So, members of the Princeton University community and visitors have broad freedom to express themselves in a manner consistent with university policies. At the same time, university policies prohibit conduct that, among other things, disrupts university operations and activities. This lecture would fall under that category. To be clear, any individuals who disrupt this event are in violation of university policies and would be subject to disciplinary action and will be required to leave the premises immediately. Let's enjoy this talk because it's a great opportunity to engage here and then ask tough questions, right, Senator? Yes. So it is really my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Senator Bill Frist is a member of the great class of 1974. He went on to become a groundbreaking transplant surgeon and also represented the state of Tennessee in the U.S. Senate from 1995 to 2007. Senator Frist served as Senate Majority Leader from 2003 to 2007. And in this leadership role was instrumental in the passage of the 2003 Medicare Modernization Act and also the Senator Paul Simon Water for the Poor Act of 2005, which promoted worldwide access to safe and clean water. Here at Princeton, Senator Frist has had a number of leadership roles since leaving the university, was a member of the Board of Trustees from 74 to 78 as a young alumni trustee, and then returned in 91 to 2001 as a charter trustee. Senator Frist has gone on to take recent leadership roles in a number of environmental-related matters, including chairing, being the global chair for the Nature Conservancy, which is the world's largest environmental NGO, and is a leading authority on health and healthcare, and was in charge of the National Academy of Medicine's report on climate change and health that came out last year. Did it come out last year? And is currently co-authoring with his colleague Joan a great book on climate change and health. And so with that, we'll have Q&A after the talk. Both we'll have mic runners to hand you the mics, but also there'll be a QR code right over there. If you know how to use one of those, take a picture with your phone camera. The internet will take you to where you can send us your questions so they can be efficiently provided. So now, please join me in welcoming Senator Bill Frist, and who's on stage to present this Taplin lecture. Thank you.
All right, Dave, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
let's see here. Let me get organized here, get ready, and make sure we got the QR code. Good. Got it. And then, probably more important than that, everybody smile on three. 1, 2, 3. There you go. All right, let's see what we got. Gabe, thank you for the introduction, and I'll kind of be referring to a number of the things that you mentioned coming through, but it's an honor for me to be here. Princeton has been very much a part of my life, and to be able to have a trajectory that comes back again and again is obviously very personal to me. My great nephew, Tommy Frist, is here. To be able to say hello to him and think back, we've now had probably 12 or 13 people from our extended family come, but I was the pioneer there back a long time ago, coming in 1971. So it's kind of neat to be able to see that trajectory continuing today. Gabe 2 years ago said the Taplin Lecture is coming up, and I said, when is it? He said, this invitation is going to be extended now, but not until we get the building and can pack the room. So Gabe, thanks for the invitation. The Taplin Lecture is now officially kicked off. I did have to say, Frank Taplin, I didn't know at all, but these sort of legacy contributions, I think really is important, especially when you're at a place like Princeton, where you're looking to the past and the present and the future. You're using the past to better educate yourself so you can do better in the future. So Frank Taplin, in 1996, he was on the Environmental Defense Fund, and in the newsletter he said one sentence, which I'll say. Frank Taplin, my own feeling is that as an insurance policy, we've got to act now because there is a lag between the action and the time the consequences become evident. I choose that, and he's talking about conservation, obviously, coming in. And the next sentence in this article was, an optimist, Taplin expects that his new great-granddaughter will see great environmental progress in the next century. Now, that was 1996. I don't know Frank Taplin. I do a little bit more now. Don't know where his great-granddaughter is, but now we're 30 years later. Are we doing better? Yes, we're doing better. And you'll see a lot of my remarks, and you'll get a feel for why, are fairly optimistic where we are, although everybody, and as I said hello to people coming into the room, everybody said, oh, these times, you know, where things are falling apart, there's no support. I said, remember, it's only been 6 months or 8 months. And 11 months ago, you were saying we were on a roll. So you'll get a little bit of the perspective of why. So it is really fun for me to be back here at Princeton. I had my 5th year reunion 2 years ago, and so we'll get started. I spent most of my life here in the operating room as a heart and lung transplant surgeon, taking hearts out and lungs out, one person, and putting them in another person, taking out failing hearts that were devastating to somebody's life and giving them a new chance at life. And that's what I did, kind of what I like to think that I'm doing now. Those years gave me a really visceral understanding. Those are hearts that are on the bottom part of that photograph. A real visceral understanding of why you're looking at conservation and climate change and nature and biodiversity through the lens of a physician, of healing, of what being a person is all about. Our health in the large sense depends not only on our genes and on our behaviors, but on the world around us. And by that I mean the air that we breathe and the food that we eat, by the soil underneath our feet, and by the skies above us, by the temperature that's around us, by the climate, by the weather. That's who we are. That is health. It's not just being a transplant surgeon taking a heart out in a hospital in the hospital walls. Today, as Gabe mentioned, I also serve as chair of the Nature Conservancy. It is the world's largest conservation environmental group that exists today. We're in 77 countries, 5,000 people, over 1,000 scientists who work for us, indeed, around the world. This is in Appalachia. It's our farm up in Appalachia, Central Appalachia, very much of the land itself. And in being chairman, and Gabe was nice enough to introduce Joan, we travel around the world in linking the Appalachian forest to the Caribbean coral reefs, to the world that we live in broadly, the African grasslands where we were 6 months ago. And I say all of that because that's location and sense of place, but it's the people and the interaction of the people in all of those settings. So I speak to you from two vantage points today. Number one, the individual physician who cares about the patient, the person. Annie Roberts, somebody who I just saw, we hadn't seen each other in 40 years, but trained together at Mass General. It's the people itself as a physician. And the other vantage point is a conservationist, is somebody in global sense who looks at planetary health and global health. And today we'll explore how those two things are inseparable. We will look at planetary health through the lens of individual health and well-being. These two worlds will be pulling together, not metaphorically, but indeed biochemically. And for me, this is why nature matters today to us, not 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It's why the environment around us matters today. Right up front, people say, okay, that's an interesting trajectory. We started with Princeton and Gabe put these three phases in of being in the heart and the medical world, and then jumping to the policy and the government world, and then the world of conservation. Where did the conservation come from? It's pretty easy for me to answer it because it's kind of the heart, and it's the mind, and it's the sense of place. And the heart really comes back to my wife, Tracy. Tracy, my wife, is a child of the land. Her bond in nature is really instinctive, rooted very much in soil and in seasons and tending native grasses and kind of what these pictures represent. For about 2 decades, when I was doing the heart transplant stuff, the field was brand new. So we had to figure out how to transplant. Andy Roberts, I was talking to him, I left Mass General because it was a moratorium. We're not going to do heart transplants at Mass General, so I went to Stanford, and sort of we began to figure that out. So I was obsessed 18 hours a day for years and years and years and years about the human body, about figuring out how to give life and health and hope and healing to individuals. Tracy came into my life and opened up and said, that's really good, and it's good stuff, but why don't you open up a little bit broader and look at the nature around you? So that's number one. That's kind of the heart. Then the mind is pretty interesting as well. We did the heart transplants and we got it to work. Didn't work, used to work. It got it to work. So the next dream for me was doing a lung transplant. The problem is nobody in the world had ever done a lung transplant. They hadn't been done successful because of it's simple, the connection between the recipient's body and the lung is a bronchial anastomosis, and nobody could get that to heal. And it wouldn't heal because we had to give so much steroid to it. And then all of a sudden, 2 Norwegian scientists out in the field one day discovered a fungus. And that fungus very much is a new fungus at the time, and it had these magical properties of being able to allow healing of that bronchial anastomosis. So ultimately, that fungus came from the soil. These Norwegian scientists, a drug called cyclosporin was developed, that compound, and all of a sudden lung transplants could be done. And lung transplants were done at that time. That wasn't that long ago. This is the fungus itself. It's Talipocladium inflatum. It wasn't named at the time. It was ultimately named. It became cyclosporin. And what it allowed for the first time in human history for us to do lung transplants. And this woman right now is the longest living lung transplant in the world today. It's a woman I transplanted in 1990. I'd been doing it for a couple of years. She's alive today, 34 years ago. Pamela Everett Smith, obviously a pioneer in her own right, but nevertheless made possible by nature and a fungus and something that came from the soil, a little bit serendipitous by these Norwegian scientists. The third area is that place. Tracy and I live on a farm in rural Tennessee today. And it's the home, as you can see in this slide, to chickens and guinea fowl and horses and sheep and goats and Australian shepherds and border collies, and work my border collie every other day, barn cats. We have a river in the front of our yard, and we have a creek in the back of our yard. It's where we live every day, about 22 miles from Nashville. But it's also an archaeological site. So we talked about the mind, Tracy, we talked about the heart, and then the mind, we talk about sort of the Norwegian scientists. But this sense of place is important to me. We live right in the middle of this slide. I think this is a point right there. This is a 40-acre site. This is a 12-acre fortified village that existed from about 900 AD. Again, this is where we live. It's where we wake up, where we go to sleep every night, right here. These are Native American mounds or indigenous people mounds. This is the Harpeth River coming through. So every day I'm reminded that for 300 years a civilization was there of people like this, and this is a depiction of one of those people. About 2,000 people lived there. But it was for 300 years, from 900 to 1200, and then it disappeared. It's where we wake up. It's where we go to bed at night. Why did it disappear? It disappeared. And we didn't know it until dendrochronology, and probably some of you study that, until about 25, 30 years ago, looking at tree rings came and said it was climate change, the changing climate, that civilization disappeared, left a 100-year hole in history for Middle Tennessee, or what is today Middle Tennessee. And it was because of a drought, a famine. 6 years later, a drought, a famine. You can withstand 2 or 12 years of droughts and famines, but not a third, another drought and a famine. And with that, the civilization disappeared. A changing climate. Climate matters. The world around us matters. So then you start putting all that together and you say, okay, now I kind of get it. Those three things kind of took me, a heart surgeon, and someone who cared, but really didn't have this world open to those sorts of things. So let's start a little bit about the individuals themselves. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is simple overall, and those of you who are sort of probably at Princeton right now can cite this quickly, but the hypothalamus, which is a little almond-sized command center, senses this stress, and it could be heat, it could be hurricanes, it could be hot weather, it could be anxiety, and sends this CRH, this corticotropin-releasing hormone, down just a few millimeters down to the pituitary. The pituitary all of a sudden releases ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, and then that goes into the bloodstream, goes all the way down and hits the adrenal glands, which are these little glands at the bottom, little caps that sit on your kidney, and all of a sudden that releases cortisol. Cortisol is fight or flight. It's the fuel of alertness. And for minutes to hours, it's pretty good. It's adaptation. It makes you run if there's a tiger, that sort of thing. But if it's sitting there being sustained again and again and again, some bad things can happen. It begins to reshape our entire chemistry, and it makes it so blood pressure goes up, hypertension. It makes our heart rate go up. It makes dulling of our memory. It makes suppressing our immunity. The good news, the hopeful news, is that nature switches that circuit off. That whole cascade that I just went through. And we know that time in forest or along water can lower that stress hormone cortisol within about 25 to 30 minutes. Most of you know Shinrin-yoku or forest bathing. It drops heart rate. It brings calmness. It drops blood pressure all within about 18 to 19 minutes. MRI brain imaging of the amygdala itself shows that natural settings quiet that region of the brain. That's our internal alarm center. Yes, nature biochemically restores calm. That feels the heart and the blood vessels you saw a little bit from the operating room. Fine particles, many of you know it, particulate matter is called PM2.5. And it's from cars, it's from industry, it's from wildfires. They slip down through the airways, they go into the lungs, into the blood, and they scar that delicate one-cell thick little membrane that is there. And it leads to thickening, or it leads to hardening of the arteries, including those which feed the heart, the coronary arteries. That's what I used to do, bypass surgery. I'd done thousands of those, taken veins out and put them on the heart, bypassing the disease itself. So all of this is the first step to coronary disease, and climate change and heat amplify this overall effect of pollution, leading to this ground level, again, this is maybe too much science, but leading to this ground level ozone, and then blood vessels dilate and blood pressure falls and heart races to compensate, and the heart works harder and harder and harder. That's not bad for maybe a good, healthy heart, but if you're a senior, if you're older than 50 years of age and you have some coronary artery disease, again, or you have diabetes, that stress can be fatal. The good news is that nature offers protection. We know that green, cool spaces in neighborhoods reduce inflammation. There's a particular project I'll refer to in a little bit called the Green Heart Project down in Louisville, Kentucky. Residents surrounded by new trees showed lower blood pressure and a blood chemistry called C-reactive protein, which is diffused inflammation, which causes all sorts of bad things in the body itself. More trees, healthier hearts. Our lungs pull about 30 gallons of air each minute across membranes that are like thinner than spiderweb, thinner than silk itself. But that efficiency is also our vulnerability. And these tiny little 2.5 particles, about the 30th the size of a hair, and it can be wildfire smoke, all reach deep into these little air sacs, also triggering inflammation. And really searing, and all of that worsens whether it's asthma or COPD or bronchitis or emphysema. Neighborhoods, we know with more canopy, see fewer hospitalizations for asthma. When we protect forests, we are literally protecting our own airways and our children's. The immune system itself, as a transplant surgeon, I had to be an expert, so-called expert, in this balancing between putting a heart in, protecting from rejection of the heart, and keeping infection down. So the immune system I'm fascinated with. It's constantly recalibrating using signals from the environment. All around us, the environment, and it could be from the soil, it could be from the temperature, it could be from the weather itself, the world around us. Most of you have heard of the old friends hypothesis that says that when we evolve in and of soil, if we're going barefoot, if we live on farms, the soil and the plant microbes teach tolerance over time. Well, as we all know, modern urban life cuts that off. Contact with nature itself, it could be the soil, it could be the earth, restores them, and it bolsters our immune system. Not just to fight, a heart, transplanted heart, but everyday infections coming in. Time in green space lowers the inflammatory proteins. It boosts activity of specialized immune cells, natural killer cells, different types of T cells that we have today. So nature doesn't just soothe immunity, it tunes it. It finally tunes it to keep us healthy. The brain itself feels climate too. Cortisol, we know, and the ultrafine pollutants cross the blood-brain barrier itself, keeping that area of the amygdala on alert and dulling focus in the prefrontal cortex. Nature quiets that noise. There's a study in Stanford that says a 90-minute walk in green space lowered neural activity linked to things like depression or to rumination. Nature boosts, visual nature boosts serotonin. It boosts dopamine, a neuronal growth protein that's called BDNF. It's brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is sort of the fertilizer of new brain cells. Children who grow up near parks show better attention and learning. Extreme heat and weather do the opposites. Studies show that on hotter days, rates of anxiety go up, rates of depression go up, hospitalization for depression goes up, substance abuse and aggressive behavior goes up. Mental health measurably worsens. The brain, just like the heart, depends on harmony. It depends on equilibrium, and nature restores it. None of these systems, and I've kind of walked you through this for a real purpose because it integrates the way I think about it and the way I think we as a society should think about nature and biodiversity through the lens of health and why it matters to you today. All of this is integrated, continuously sensing all of these different systems. I present them as kind of linearly overall, but they're exponential, they're integrated. It's a mosaic. Our individual health and the planet's health are literally one and the same system. The diagnosis is serious, and we all know that. But the good news is that the prescription is really crystal clear. And again, I'm thinking more of as a diagnostician, and I think of treatment, and I think of treatment plan. Unless we decarbonize our energy system, the thickening blanket that surrounds the globe today is going to continue to thicken. And global warming, obviously, will increase. These greenhouse gases that envelop the planet will continue to enlarge. It'll outstrip our evolutionary ability. The body is just not made over history to evolve as fast as that global warming is occurring. So the prescription itself is really pretty simple, but it's not easy. Reduce carbon emissions, shift to cleaner energy. And it may be nuclear, 24/7, clean, safe. We got to show that it's safe. It might be fusion, it might be hydrogen. This is going to take time. It's going to take investment. And it'll take a certain amount of patience. It's a big lift, and all of you say, well, you're a former majority leader, and we'll probably come back to question and answer, and the world is just like, where is it today? And I'm depressed, and things are going haywire. Well, maybe in the last 8 months that's the case. But over time, and I'll come back to this year to year looking at things, we're on a pretty good trajectory today. Yes, administration to administration over time sends these contradictory, these chaotic messages, these confusing signals. But that does not alter what we talked about, the chemistry, the physiology, what I've shown to you, looking at these changes through the human body. And progress is happening. Energy demand is booming. This is from a trip that we took down in Georgia the other day. You see the sheep who are grazing under these solar panels. Energy demand is booming. We know it's economic growth, and economic growth is a good thing, and creation of jobs is a good thing. These data centers, I know, are taking huge amounts of energy. None of us would have predicted it 5 to 10 years ago. We have this explosion in AI, coming up here, walking up the steps and looking at the classroom over there, studying AI today. It's exciting. The hyperscalers, I really didn't know much about the hyperscalers and what they're doing, but Amazon and Microsoft now, and in Meta and Google are investing billions and billions of dollars that they were not investing in things like nuclear, in alternative energy. Yes, it's self-preservation and it's about the markets, but that's new money coming in to accelerate to a cleaner, greener type of energy that just didn't occur 3 to 4 years ago. They are investing, yes, self-interested, but they're investing in technology. They're investing in the future, and that can be to the benefit of us. And they'll play a major role in both long-term energy supply and addressing the climate change, the changing climate, the same climate that drove that civilization where I live with Tracy every single day away now about 900 years ago. China comes up all the time, and China, yes, it is. China's building these coal plants, and clearly that's happening, but the full picture is a lot more complicated. Catherine Hayhoe, who's going to do the next Taplin, is it going to be the next Taplin lecture? Next Taplin lecture in March, is the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy, and it's probably the best communicator in the world, and so got to come back, I don't know what the date in March here. But she looked at it this way, and I'll quote, because it's just from the other day. She says, in 2024 alone, China's booming exports of clean energy technologies, solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles, and wind turbines cut global emissions by about 1%, or 220 million tons of CO2. Close quotation. She points out, yes, it took energy to build those products, but the emissions were offset in 6 months. For the rest of the next 10 years, in 15 or 20 years, in 6 months, those emissions have been paid back. The United States still is the leader, of course, in nuclear energy when it comes to China. We probably, I don't know, Gabe, you can correct me, but and people in the audience can, but probably twice as much in terms of nuclear production, United States versus China. But China, by far, is winning the race to add more nuclear right now, as we speak. So again, it's a complicated matter. The data itself right now, China has 32 nuclear reactors under construction right now. There are none in the US under commercial construction. 32 in China. For the small modular reactors, China has the world's first commercial reactor under construction. The US has no commercial SMR yet. Don't need to go to China, but it's worth thinking about in the global sense. Most of my talking to you today is about the human, how it affects us right now. The global, obviously, is hugely important. Health benefits. Consider, for me, okay, Nature Conservancy, I want to take you to that world quickly. Nature as medicine. As a pollution, every time I opened somebody's chest, which I did thousands of times, I didn't know exactly what I was going to see, but it might be a black lung, just coated, a black lung. I was a thoracic surgeon, so I do tumors, which I knew in the back of my mind were influenced by pollution, by these pollutants. I would see these scarred airways. Well, is nature really medicine, or is it just like these observations? I'll take you back to the University of Louisville, and they tested the idea. They planted 8,000 trees and shrubs in a neighborhood near a highway, which you see here. 6 years later, residents surrounded by new trees had lower blood levels of that C-reactive protein in an NIH-sponsored study. That's a marker of inflammation that drives the lung disease, the heart disease that I operated on. The trees didn't just make the neighborhood prettier, as you can see, they made people biologically healthier. The data is now inspiring cities nationwide, from bus stops in Nashville, Tennessee. We just passed a transportation bill, and a big part of that was this sort of greening because of bus stops, and in schoolyards to plant more trees. Another study found that people who live near more green space have lower rates of 15 different diseases, including diabetes, things that I took care of, heart disease and lung disease and depression. The calm that we all feel, we felt more of it after COVID, I think, because a lot of us had the opportunity to be alone and be in nature, so we're a little more aware of it. The science now demonstrates it, but the calm we feel on a quiet walk through trees isn't just psychological or emotional. It's physiological. It's biochemical. Urban greening is good and real and documented medicine. So Green Heart Louisville, the data that I just presented to you, is a local example of what we at the Nature Conservancy call, and it's not great terminology, but nature-based solutions. Right now, most of the carbon that's in the air and the bioemissions in the cars and all is absorbed by nature itself. And by nature-based solutions, you can define it in lots of different ways, but in essence, it's actions that protect and restore and manage the natural ecosystems around us. And the planet gives us that. It's the planet's gift to us. All of that allows us to improve our own health and jobs and economic activity. So it's simple, and if you look at this nature-based lens, it's simple, it's scalable, and we know that it works. A few months ago, Tracy and I were bobbing up and down in a small skiff off Virginia's eastern shore. A scientist there showed us a really remarkable sight, and it was this eelgrass returning to waters where it had vanished. It had vanished for nearly a century. That restoration is doing everything we hoped for. This is just eelgrass. It softens wave energy during storms. It reduces erosion and flooding. It captures carbon beneath the floor and beneath the sea floor. It cleanses the water. It brings back the oysters and the scallops. When nature is restored, and there we saw it, the communities join in, everybody wins. At the Nature Conservancy, we're measuring success totally differently now than we used to. It used to, I'm talking about in the last 5 years, it used to be in acres or it used to be in miles restored. No longer. It's in human outcomes. It's why it matters now. And so every time our scientists, we have 1,000 scientists at the Nature Conservancy, a lot coming in. I didn't realize it when I got involved 12, 13 years ago, 1,000 scientists. And now whenever they look at a new project, one of their filters is, how is it going to affect the community? How is it going to affect the individual? It's not natural to ask that. Once you start asking it, you say, well, of course it is. Tracy and I helped establish a new Planetary and Human Health initiative at the Nature Conservancy, where that question, that filter, routinely gets asked by our scientists. Each proposed project, you don't have to, it's not a check the box, but it's let's look at things a little bit differently as to the why. So in coastal Virginia, flooding is so frequent, we learned there that children on narrow peninsulas, sometimes they can't reach school. By reducing flooding, those underwater meadows are giving kids their school days back. This relationship between people and nature. Clean energy is no longer just clean. It's pretty cool because it's getting cheap and affordable. Again, I had to pull this slide. I like the sheep. I got a border collie, so I like my border collie working sheep. So I have this affinity to sheep, but it's pretty cool because they graze underneath the solar panels. You don't have to pay for any sort of mowing under the panels themselves. The sheep themselves, because of the shade of the solar panels, grow more, they grow faster, so it's a win-win for people. Nobody really thought of putting sheep under solar panels until recently. But solar panel costs have fallen 90% in the last 10 years. Again, trajectory. Things are going crazy in Washington in many different ways today, and maybe you don't think that or you do think that, depending on what your orientation is. But overall, in the last 10 years, 90% is how much solar has fallen. So whether you're running a business or a home, energy is rapidly transforming right now, before our eyes. Investments in technology can accelerate that clearly, and that's where it is. It's important for us to all get involved and to make the case however we want to. I'm doing it in one way through the impact through humans, but we know investments in technology can accelerate that. As I mentioned, the hyperscalers, you have Amazon, you have Microsoft, they're accelerating their innovation, whether it's safer nuclear, which I mentioned, or green hydrogen, or even fusion, which Princeton, is a huge global leader in, and has been since long before I was here so long ago. A really moving theory from really this world of theory to reality. So I do fundamentally believe that science and technology will deliver cleaner power that we need to thin, and that's the way I look at it, big old blanket that's wrapped around us with technology, with the investment. Energy production is only half the story. Consumption matters too, and we know that. Across corporate America, leaders today, and I was at a board meeting today in New York with this same healthcare company that I'll mention. But healthcare, so I'm in the profession of healthcare, a huge sector of our economy, but healthcare produces about 10 to 11% of all the bad stuff of the emissions in the world. We're in the business of saving lives through the transplant and everything else, yet we're contributing to it. So we need to shine that mirror on ourselves and that light on ourselves. I was in New York this morning and last night, and I don't want to talk about the company itself, but it's a national healthcare company, and it offers a really good example, I think. As a responsible board member and representing the shareholders broadly, but also in the back of my mind as a doctor, I asked other board members and management the simple question: how is our use in this multi-state national company, how is our use of energy and climate change affecting our bottom line? Now, they said, well, here's this guy from the Nature Conservancy, he's a Republican, where's this coming from? This is going to get political too fast. But I came back to the next board meeting and asked the same question. What is our energy? What is our footprint itself? What does climate change mean? They said, okay, Frist, you're the doctor and all that. Third time I came back, third board meeting, they came back, said, okay, we'll look at it. And the results stunned them. It stunned them. Facilities on the East Coast, they found, were sustaining more and more hurricane damage. Insurance premiums around the country because of those coastal impacts were soaring. Air conditioning units, first time they'd looked at it because the question was asked, air conditioning units were burning out in all of these hospitals across the country twice as fast as they were 15 years ago. Why? Because of hotter and hotter days. Hotter, wetter conditions were also creating new infection risk. When the clinician came forward and presented the epidemiology, which they hadn't looked at it compared to 10 years ago, all of a sudden they were seeing more fungi. They started talking about mosquito-borne diseases, the expanding of the range of mosquitoes, of ticks, of waterborne pathogens, all bringing new disease, and they were seeing this for the first time, but not until the question was asked. Now, it's pretty cool because, to their credit, those initially doubting executives, or the ones who didn't even want to look because it was a political issue, newly enlightened but what they'd learned, they just changed their perspective. They took definitive action. We all need to ask the right questions. They realized that climate wasn't a political distraction. It was a business health issue that required a business health answer. Ignoring it was quite literally draining profits, and investors noticed that fast. When you see climate and biodiversity through the lens of health, everything begins to connect. Nature stops being background and becomes an essential asset because it is our nature, our planet is our original infrastructure. It's what sustains every community and every economy. Yet we've been dismantling it. Think of deforestation, massive deforestation and the loss of mangroves and seagrass around the world are stripping the planet of its ability to pull all of the carbon that we're putting into the air. Forest once absorbed about a third, just forest, this is not the ocean, just forest once absorbed about a third of all of our human emissions. From transportation, from productivity, from our energy, coal plants, a third naturally absorbed by nature. Now, more than half of those forests are gone, and with that, more destructive emissions stay in the air to feed that blanket, emissions to harm us. And with only 1/6 of natural coastlines remaining, more than 800 million people live at risk of flooding. At the Nature Conservancy, let me shift to a couple of things. Innovation doesn't just mean technology. For years, the country of Belize struggled under crushing debt in a dying reef, the second largest coral reef in the world. Stretching about 180 miles along the coast, that reef was home to more than 1,400 species, yet it was collapsing, literally collapsing, under the combined pressures of overfishing, of warming waters, of acidification, of mangrove loss. Meanwhile, Belize, a poor country, relatively poor country, and its sovereign debt, it was in crisis, economic crisis. Its sovereign debt had high interest bonds, were trading at a deep discount. The nation was in financial distress, and so was its ecosystem. So our team from the Nature Conservancy, working with international partners, and we partner with people all over the world, brought in the global banks, we brought in financial experts and investors that were looking for environmental impact and, yes, some modest financial returns. And together, through using these new financing bonds, green bonds, and in this case, blue bonds, we retired more than $500 million of Belize's debt and replaced it with these lower rate, more efficient, more effective, global marketed blue bonds. The saving to the country were transformative. They reduced through these bonds their overall sovereign debt, and in return, they committed to conservation, to protecting the reef, to investing in sustainable fisheries, to halting the mangrove destruction, preserving both all the local livelihoods, coming back to the humans, and a vital carbon sink. So this is a groundbreaking type of innovation that did not exist 6 years ago, that's brought over $1 billion to conservation, not out of taxpayer dollar, but out of markets. Again, the type of innovation, we think of technology, we think of innovation, we go to technology. I love technology. It made possible the transplants I was able to do, but also the financial innovation that we, thinking creatively, can accomplish by coming together. That model pairs economic relief with environmental stewardship in a way that has never been done, helping countries to protect ecosystems, while at the same time strengthening their own economies in ways that had never been done. Building on that momentum, the Nature Conservancy, again working with our partners, we launched, I'll just mention it, a new, again, we're taking things at scale that we're all doing locally, taking it to scale, a thing called Enduring Earth. Again, I won't go into it now, but it's a global partnership that does just that. It links together these ecological protection, community development, and long-term financing in ways that had never been done in the past. Where else? In Canada, we've done it. In Costa Rica, we've done it. In Mongolia, millions of acres are now protected, not as locked-off preserves that you just put away, but where people use them. They're landscapes where people and nature thrive together. In Mongolia alone, because this is one of the massive projects that we can do at scale, working with the Nature Conservancy and local partners, the country is already ahead of schedule in safeguarding 30% of its vast, vast grasslands, one of the planet's largest carbon sinks. I kind of want to talk a little bit about leadership and hope. All these examples do give me real hope, and when I share them, I think of them the same way I do. Same way I kind of explain these complex medical diagnoses before you take a heart out of somebody. You want to make sure you do it with empathy, with compassion, and framing it in the right way. And I think doctors and nurses can be really good voices. I toured the medical center, the health clinic a few minutes ago or an hour ago, first time I'd seen it there. It made me think a lot about, what makes somebody healthy, the mental health, the behavioral health, the genetic health coming in. Doctors and nurses are still, politicians are not, obviously, but Congress is not, obviously, but doctors and nurses are still trusted. Few parents will turn away from a doctor who is telling you what they think is best about your child's health. That's why it's so encouraging that pediatricians nationwide are stepping up, are educating families about climate change through that lens of health. And take a great example is my friend Lisa Patel from Stanford Children's Health. We saw her, I guess it was in September, and she was at the podium, but she was there and she was tired. And she was exhausted because she'd just come off a 48-hour shift. She had had to resuscitate 4 newborns, all born listless and blue. Normally that might happen, she said, once every several months. But this time it was during a brutal, brutal heat wave. Lisa's a full-time doctor, a mom of 2, yet she's also stepping up and leading the Medical Society Consortium on Climate and Health, mobilizing physicians nationwide. Another pediatrician I know in Ohio focuses on how doctors talk with parents about climate and about health, bringing these two worlds together. She told me, and I quote, "Much of the messaging got coded in partisan language, and that hadn't helped." Her advice to colleagues is really quite simple. Talk about the child's health, not the politics. Listen first. Lead with empathy. That's what the health lens looks like in action. I have to also mention, because the Washington thing is confusing now, but look at what's going on in the cities and in the towns and with mayors and with governors. Local leaders can't hide from the impact that a changing climate, that biospecies loss, that biodiversity loss brings to us. When residents literally collapse on sidewalks or they suffer burns from some scorching pavement. And that's happening in Phoenix and in Tucson, where we visit, and talking to the mayors. Mayors are listening, and mayors know they must act. Cities are opening cooling centers. Those are 2 great cities where that's happening at scale. They're electrifying fleets. They're planting trees. They're partnering with churches to check on vulnerable neighbors. Whether they're Democrats or Republicans, hundreds of mayors have joined the Climate Mayors Coalition to bring cleaner, more resilient communities. That's what leadership looks like. So obviously you can tell I'm not a climate warrior. I'm not an expert, but I have been to Washington, so I'm used to what battles are like. But we've had enough of those battles. And now I think is the time for us to reframe where we are with climate and with even green energy and with loss of biodiversity. We need healers. It's time to find the shared values, and none are more universal than our health and safety of things like our children. I personally, and I'll wrap things up here, have seen it work as Majority Leader of the United States Senate, and I was just occupying that position for a period of time. I got to see it. A crisis that is equally partisan at the time, it doesn't seem like it now because it's 20 years later, was HIV/AIDS. I was the only physician in the United States Senate at that time. Kind of amazing, we have a democracy, but there was no other doctors in the Senate. So I had the same sort of framing. And HIV/AIDS at the time, it was stigmatized. It was, certain populations, this and that. It was Democrat, it was Republican, it was progressive, it was conservative, it was evangelical. Everybody just kind of had it locked down. But I'll use an example. Jesse Helms, a great friend, icon in conservative politics and in conservative leadership from North Carolina at the time. Those of you who are older know his voice and all. I went to Jesse Helms because Jesse said this HIV virus is just like, it's a moral issue. And therefore, we really shouldn't do much at the federal level. And I said, no, Jesse, there are 10 million orphans alive today who have been orphaned because of this virus. Let's reframe it about what it's doing to health and to human health. And Jesse liked kids. He loved kids. And Jesse said, oh, I get it. For $1 a day for 20 days through a particular drug at the time, we can make it so somebody is not an orphan. And Jesse shifted. And then you had the Bonos of the world, the music industry of the world, you had the conservatives of the world, you had the evangelicals come to the table because of the reframing. And today, this is compared to just 24 years ago, before we passed what's called PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. Passed at a time where people said it was impossible to do. There are now 25 million people alive today because of that legislation of a partisan issue, and an issue equally partisan to what we're seeing in climate today. Conversations change everything. So for all the challenges, as you can tell, I'm not an optimist. I think I'm a realist, but you might think I'm an optimist coming in. My friend, but I'm not alone. The other day, we're talking to, or this summer, then had a follow-up conversation with somebody that many of you know from here, David Victor. He's a U.S. San Diego. He's an expert in climate policy. He's also an expert in energy markets. And he reminds me that while some early goals, like the measures of holding global warming to 2 degrees, were always aspirational. If you really step back, progress has been real, thanks to advances that we've talked a little bit about in renewable energy, a new look at nuclear, global economic shifts. We've cut in half the trajectory of that increase that we were on just 10 years ago. So it depends how you look at it, yes. But as David likes to say, people think we're failing in climate. I say the opposite. Science, technology, and nature together, I fundamentally believe can meet this challenge. And I think by beginning to view climate through this lens of health, we can bring people together that otherwise would not come together. And again, I'm saying this having been in the most partisan rooms in America. It's win-win solutions that make life better now and protect the future. And whether it's what Taplin said in the opening comments, for your children or for your grandchildren or for you, it matters now. Clean energy, private sector innovation, nature's own capacity, which I wanted to just share with you, the power of that to heal the planet, can give the next generation a true future filled with hope. My dad used to say the world is full of great opportunities, cleverly disguised as insolvable problems. I saw it with heart transplants, which were never successful, but now routine, with lung transplants that had never been done because of a little fungus that people serendipitously found, with HIV/AIDS that people thought politically was impossible to address. The disguised insolvable problems, I do think planetary health is one of them, because in the end, and this will be my final sentence, but in the end, it's really not about saving the planet. It's about saving our health. It's about saving our well-being and our children and grandchildren. It's about saving ourselves. And the prescription is like crystal clear. Protect nature. I'll add that in because it's not something you hear about as much except for an opportunity like this. Protect nature, preserve health, because nature is medicine. Thank you very much. Great to be with you. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right.
All right.
What about it, Gabe?
Well, thank you, Senator Frist. Thank you. Please, here. Oh, you got your water. You got all
mine.
the water.
Let me get yours.
I have it here. It's got my yep. And so,
good.
All right. So for those of you that got the UPC symbol, what is it called? Yes. I will open this screen up and presumably, oh look, questions will assume below. There are already 2 questions. But I am going to take the chair's prerogative to ask a question of my own. So, I listened carefully to try to find a big cleavage between what you were saying, how you were perceiving the issues underlying here, and what your prescription was, and what people who I know well, who are very much on the Democratic side of the spectrum, and how they would express themselves, and how they would, and I really didn't see that much of a gap. I mean, I saw a little bit of an emphasis, more of an emphasis on the role of business relative to the role of government. But the underlying prescription was the same, right? Decarbonization, transition to cleaner energy. I saw perhaps more of a focus on people than a focus on people and nature for its own sake. You know, having been leader of the Senate, you had to work with colleagues across the aisle. Do you see a big gap? Or you know, where is the gap? Where is the things that could be really partisan intrinsically in nature? And you highlighted a lot of things that are in common. So what is the gap?
Well, you know, first of all, as you can tell, I'm not a politician. I would have stayed there forever if I were. I do think there's a fundamental goodness, and this is where people will disagree on it, that brings people back to aligning self-interest with public interest. And where that fails, government, this is all philosophy, so everybody's going to disagree, but where that fails, government should step in. Government can invest more up front and longer term than what human nature, which is fight or flight, or what the hypothalamic pituitary axis tells us coming on. So right now, just an example I use is HIV/AIDS. It was done by government. It was done with the American taxpayer, but it did take leadership coming in. I have to say the leadership was Republican at the time. But it was not Republican, really. It was like, wasn't American, but it was what America is all about. And that's why the framing of it, I think, is so important. People aren't going to agree with, hopefully you agree with 60% of what I say. I don't expect you to agree with 100%. But I do think the framing of it puts you in a room where I, as leader, I was the highest ranking legislative Republican in the United States of America. I don't brag on that, but that's just the way it was, kind of by chance, by luck, whatever, maybe lack of luck coming in. But when I walk into a room now and I can not lead with climate change or beat you down or the world's going to blow up, it's not. And so if you don't lead with that, but you lead with a little bit what you do as a physician, that you listen really careful and you know the science, you know what the facts, and people have different interpretation of that is today, it gives you a certain optimism that you would not otherwise have. I mean, I'm not going to be necessarily right about it, but I can tell you, if I can spend an hour with somebody, I don't care what their politics are. I don't even use the word climate until I get about 80% of the way through it, but they're there and they understand the science. And so that's kind of my approach. Not for everybody, but that's the way I do it.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to bend your ear tonight. So I'm not going to take advantage of my position here. Instead, we have mic runners out there. And so if you have a question, raise your hand and they will get to you. In the meantime, I will find my reading glasses.
All right.
And I will read the questions that are on here. And so we have
right.
2 questions over here, green and blue. I believe those are the colors. Yes.
Say who you are if you don't mind and just where you're from.
Hello. My name is Cliff and I'm from New Jersey. So first, thank you so much for your fantastic talk. You mentioned how nature is medicine and it has biochemical effects that are beneficial for us. But our medical healthcare system only prescribes like medicine and drugs for illnesses. Do you see any chance or value in prescribing things like climate nature or forest bathing as a part of healthcare in general?
Yes, I think everybody, heard the question. Yes, and again, I'm the most dramatic because I take these hearts out, so I'm sort of start at the end of the most dramatic stuff of cutting hearts out and putting them in. You can tell that I really like to work sort of in the preventive, in the food that we eat, or the air that we breathe, or the whole upstream as far as we can go, and being practical coming in. There are a number of physicians today, and that's why I mentioned Lisa Patel, who write prescriptions about time in nature. And before, people could say, well, that's kind of a little bit soft coming out. Now the science is there. That's why I kind of throw a little bit out with, you have to fact check me on it. But, That's why I'm here. So yeah, I think that the movement is there. I think physicians need to lead on it. I think we need to look at how much we put in the air, which we did, which I wanted to put out front. So I think we're making progress there. We're not there yet. I will say things like social determinants, non-medical determinants of health. Uwe Reinhardt taught me 95% of what I know about health. And it's not the transplant, it's the behavior, it's the genetics, it's the environment. That's 85% of it is not the hospital itself. And so a lot of what I write today and talk about today, and there'll be an article in JAMA and that sort of thing, is very much about food. Food is medicine as well. Not there yet, but it's there. And it's one of the things, again, wherever you are politically, there are people in Washington now who say that we need to spend a lot more time there. At the same course, you had people like Bill Gates yesterday come out with his little shift. And basically he says, well, the world's not going to blow up and I'll take all that back, but you do need to take care of poor people around the world. You need to make sure that they have the food that they need, the infrastructure that they need to lift them up, which is part of the equation as well.
All right, and then we have Blue over here, and then I have a couple in here.
Thank you for the talk. I agree that there has been a lot of progress in non-carbon energy sources like wind and solar. But if I look at the Keeling curve, which is the concentration of global CO2, it keeps heading upward. In fact, the rise seems to be accelerating. Could you comment on that, please?
No, well, I can comment on it, but I think you've made the observation itself. And take me just a little bit further. I mean, I would argue because our goal is this, we sort of are there, but we're still losing the big picture. Now, what about my analogy of a heating blanket, which obviously a lot of people understand, and we're feeding that, net feeding it, so of course it's going to go up. Now, my view, as you can tell, because in the science world, I've been part of science and seen these other things happen, is that 20 years from now, the role of technology and the net increase, if we increase our carbon sinks and maybe a little bit of technology, pulling things out of the air coming in, but if we do the sort of greening by just restoring nature, doesn't mean you don't log it all, it's how you log. You don't just plant trees, you plant the right sort of trees. That once we get to a net, the blanket won't get bigger. But Ted, take me a little bit further. Do you have the microphone still? I don't know if they took it away. Yeah, because you're taking me somewhere, but I'm not sure where. I need to learn while I'm here.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last?
So when you ask that question, yes, the blanket's getting bigger, yes. More CO2 is going up because that's the job that we have to do. Is that what?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, so we agree.
But I'm not seeing it curve over, which is my hope.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think we're saying the exact same thing.
All right, so I'm going to keep on the theme. We had green, we had blue, and then there was a quick question about whether you prefer volunteer or Princeton orange. You don't have
I was looking. These are not Princeton socks. I should have worn my Princeton socks today.
So
volunteer.
So
Tennessee.
The actual question was advice on how to convince skeptical friends, colleagues, or family members that climate health impacts them, not just people in faraway lands that are different from where we're sitting.
I could have given the exact same talk. I'm a globalist, and so I've spent more time Princeton in Africa. Somebody's here, Princeton in Africa. I helped sort of get that program started 25 years ago here. While I was in the United States Senate, I'd spend 3 weeks to a month every year in the United States Senate doing surgery and throughout Africa. I really wanted to concentrate on America, not America, but more local where we are today and the power of that argument. You can make a similar sort of argument in terms of the global world coming on. And there it's easier, and I would have given a similar talk, but I would have talked about vulnerable populations. I would have talked about the mental health of vulnerable people around the world who are disproportionately impacted by climate, by loss of biodiversity. I didn't really talk about that today. I would have talked about, which I hinted a little bit, in other countries where malaria is killing 800,000 people a year, and for the first time we're seeing malaria here. We're seeing chikungunya here for the first time, and we're seeing these sort of vector-borne diseases. I didn't want to sort of take you to other countries. I wanted to stay right where we are today.
Okay.
But it matters to you. Your heart your lungs, how you breathe, your mental health today, not with polar bears and glaciers and all the stuff that's also true, but that's not what's going to drive you and bring you together and change what I think we all want to do around the world.
All right. So a question is how have and to what if so how your views on climate change and planetary health changed since your time in the Senate, when sort of a casual observer would perhaps not connect directly where you are now to then.
I hope I answer that, and I may have brought it out too long in terms of the why. The why to me is because I'm a climate warrior. I'm just not. I'm not. I gave you 3 reasons. Other people opened my eyes who I cared about. My wife, who is a product of nature, not very materialistic, loves animals, loves plants, eats from the farm. We live on a farm. Of my profession, totally changed today because of something in the soil. 40,000 people now have had lung transplants. They'd never been done until we got that bronchial anastomosis to heal. And then by happenstance, something that happens in ancient history, like the geology that's out in your lobby here of the rocks and the limestone and that sense of history. So that's what speaks to me, and I think that's what speaks to the American people. We can have the traditional arguments that environmentalists have had and that sort of thing. It's not going to move where we need to be, I don't think.
Okay, and I see a hand there, and then one over there. And then I believe we're going to have to, because of time, so let's.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a senior here in the School of Public Policy. I have a question kind of getting at what you were just mentioning about the disparate impact of climate and also the health impacts of climate. So obviously there are a lot of disparities with access to healthcare, also the phenomenon of like food deserts, as you were talking about, food is medicine, but rural and urban people struggle to get healthy food. There's also a lot of disproportionate pollution burdens, as you talked about. So I guess my question is more, as more of a conservative, where you think the role of markets are in resolving these very entrenched disparities, especially when the economic incentives are to kind of continue the disparities as they are, and what the role of government is in resolving that.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the vulnerable population thing, when I was trying to think in 40 minutes what I could get in, from a compassion standpoint, that's sort of where I start every talk. I didn't today coming in, so thanks for articulating it. It's the vulnerable populations. You notice the examples that I picked sort of subtly from Louisville, Kentucky. I just showed one slide. I didn't want to go into the project, but it was among the poorest areas of Kentucky, juxtaposed with an adjacent area, 8,000 trees planted there, a vulnerable population. And by vulnerable, I mean if something bad happened, they don't have a doctor to go to. If something bad happens, they lose access to the prescription. If something bad happened, they don't get the transportation to a better part of town. So it's in this country itself. So I hope by example. And then from a global standpoint, when I took Jill Biden, President Biden's wife, we went to Ethiopia together with famine. And I use the example in sort of the ancient history of where I live. It was famine itself, which is a part of climate change coming in, the vulnerable population. The role of government is to me, kind of implied itself. 25 million people would not be alive today if the American people hadn't spoken through the right framing of Democrat and Republican, put that aside, through the right framing to address a partisan issue that is global, addressed here at home through certain legislation, but also nationally. That's government at its best. It's addressing something that an individual scientist can't do, an individual pharmaceutical, our military can't do it. It's a coming together, addressing an issue that people thought was insurmountable, getting the best, you can say compassion, you can say hope, you can say healing, but the best of the American spirit, and investing in it. It costs $3 billion a year. I was Majority Leader of the United States Senate. I was a doctor in the Senate. I helped write the bill, wrote the Senate part of that bill. President Bush at the time had never been to Africa. He'd never been to Africa, but he listened coming in. And I'd worked 6 years with President Clinton, 6 years with President Bush, everybody kind of wanted to do something, but it took government. And same thing with energy today. I just got here this afternoon, so the plasma physics lab, when I was here and was on the board in 1974, the dreams that fusion had, they've always been there, but I get it's going to take more investment. Nuclear is a little bit different. That's why, nuclear is really, really close. At TVA, we're a green state, believe it or not. Red state, Tennessee is a green state because 50% of all the energy we use is nuclear. It's 24/7, it's safe, we've never had an accident there. It is green as could be, it's dependable, it's reliable, and it's in Tennessee. And so it's much, much closer coming in. The problem is it takes huge investment that if you have a short-term horizon of the venture capital world of 5 years or private equity, maybe 10 years, it doesn't make sense. You can't get a return in 10 years. In 30 years, you can get a return. Again, a role for government coming in. And the last question are markets. Markets are imperfect, and that's why, again, you have to have government. People don't talk, I do all the time because I talk vulnerable populations. I talk equity, I talk inclusion, I talk diversity because that's where the richness is. It brings everybody to the table, bringing together solutions or approaches to solutions that otherwise would not occur. And again, I think government has a role to insist upon that kind of diversity and that sort of inclusion. Maybe not popular now over the last 8 months, but 9 months ago it was pretty popular. 5 years ago it was popular, 10 years ago. And so don't like give up on government itself. It doesn't mean you got to vote. It means you got to make a difference. You got to have some kind of faith in our democratic government coming in. And again, that's that role. But again, come back to the private sector, access to capital, that $1 billion in conservation that I just told you about. And how many of you really knew what blue bonds and green bonds were? Raise your hand. All right, 2 hands in a room of 200 people. $1 billion in conservation came out of nowhere. Well, it's the private sector and not your taxpayer wallet. That's innovation. That's what we need to be thinking about and look at things a little bit differently, being open to it. It's why Princeton exists today. It's why this department, institute coming together exists today to have that sort of creative thinking, that innovative thinking, that not getting too discouraged, maybe not being as optimistic as I am, but participating and engaging.
All right. So looking at time and hearing an incredibly positive and optimistic response, I'm gonna.
Don't break me down. Don't break me down.
No, I'm gonna unfortunately have to call this part of the party off. But the party's not over yet. All right. So please first join me in thanking Senator Frist again for. Thank you so much.